Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we read through St. Faustina's diary. Join me, Amy Thomas, each day for a short reading out of the diary which brought us a deeper understanding of Christ's divine mercy. Merhaba, Catholic pilgrims. Merhaba is how we say hello in Turkish. If you are listening to this in the morning, good morning is günaydın. If you are listening to this in the middle of the day, we would say iyi günler. That means good days. And if you are listening to this in the evening, we would say iyi akşamlar. That means good evenings. So wherever you are and whatever time you're listening to, there's how you would say it in Turkish. So welcome back. Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to my daddy. The music that you hear at the beginning is from my pa, and he plays the guitar, self-taught. And when I needed some music for this, I asked him if I could borrow some because I knew I wouldn't have to worry about copyright problems. And he was, oh, no one's going to want to hear that, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I don't care. I love your music. I love your guitar playing. I want to use it. So he gave me permission. But that's my daddy playing the guitar. So anyway, today we are going to be continuing with at number 23, but we'll be reading the second paragraph, and we'll be going until the end, right before we get to 24. So we'll stop right before 24 today. So here we go. The second year of the novitiate was approaching. Whenever I recalled that I was to make my vows, my soul shuddered. I did not understand what I was reading. I could not meditate. It seemed to me that my prayer was displeasing to God. It seemed to me that by approaching the holy sacraments, I was offending God even more. But despite this, my confessor, Father Theodore, did not let me omit one single Holy Communion. God was working very strangely in my soul. I did not understand anything at all of what my confessor was telling me. The simple truths of the faith became incomprehensible to me. My soul was in anguish, unable to find comfort anywhere. At a certain point, there came to me the very powerful impression that I am rejected by God. This terrible thought pierced my soul right through. In the midst of the suffering, my soul began to experience the agony of death. I wanted to die, but could not. The thought came to me, of what use is it to strive for virtues? Why mortify oneself when all this is disagreeable to God? When I made this known to the director of novices, I received this reply. Know, dear sister, that God has chosen you for great sanctity. This is a sign that God wants to have you very close to himself in heaven. Have great trust in the Lord Jesus. That dreadful thought of being rejected by God is the actual torture suffered by the damned. I fled to Jesus' wounds and repeated the words of trust, but these words became for me an even greater torture. I went before the Blessed Sacrament and I began to speak to Jesus. Jesus, you said that a mother would sooner forget her infant than God his creature, and that even if she would forget her infant, I, God, will never forget my creature. Oh, Jesus, do you hear how my soul is moaning? Deign to hear the painful whimpers of your child. I trust in you, O God, because heaven and earth will pass, but your word will last forever. Still, I found not a moment of relief. Okay, so this kind of goes along with what we were reading yesterday. She is experiencing this darkness of the soul, and now she even feels utterly rejected by God. And on a very, very personal level, this totally speaks to me. I tell you this next part not because I want to draw pity, but because I want to show you why this speaks to me so much, and I know that I'm not alone in feeling this. But when I was 17, most of you who have followed me for some time know that I was sexually abused one night by 3 guys, one of them being my boyfriend. It was one of the worst nights of my life. On that night, when I left where I was, I can't even remember leaving the college campus where I was at. I really only remember waking up in the middle of screeching to a halt in the middle of a intersection at a red light, and then it was like I woke up and I looked down. I was covered with grass and dirt, and I was a mess. And I drove home, and it was late, and I went into the house, and my parents were asleep, and I wanted to go tell my dad what had happened, because I wanted my protector. And I got to my parents' bedroom door, and it was closed, and I reached my hand out to knock, and I stopped because I thought to myself, my dad will get dressed and go and kill somebody, and then he will spend his life in jail, and I don't want that for my dad. And so I walked away from the door. I went and got back in my car. It was very late at night, and I drove to the one place I could think of that I felt strong. And it's weird to say, but I went to my high school track because I had been a good track runner. And I got out. There was nobody there. I walked to the 50-yard line, and I just fell on my knees, and I let out this, basically a primal scream, because I felt so rejected by God. Because in my naive thinking, I thought as a Christian that nothing bad would ever happen to me. I thought saying I was a Christian protected me from all evils, and I don't know why I thought that. I guess I just assumed that, if you were a good person, that, only good things would happen to you. And I was in such anguish, and I said something very horrible to God out loud, and I will not repeat it. And I just decided right then and there to turn my back on God. Because I felt utterly rejected by him. It's how could you allow this to happen to me? Why didn't you do something? And I just cried, and I laid there, and I made the decision that while I still believed in God, I was just going to not really have anything to do with him. And so she's experiencing something totally different. Nothing truly has. She hasn't had something bad happen in her life, and then she feels rejected by God because he doesn't, because he allowed the bad thing to happen or something like that. I thought God is allowing her to experience this darkness of the soul. And one of the sisters, the director, says, for her great sanctity. That's so confusing, isn't it? Everything in our Christian and our faith can be so. There's always this paradox. To really become a saint, there has to be great suffering. There's just to find your life, you have to give it away to God. I mean, all these paradoxes that we have in Christianity that seem on the surface just not to make sense, but when you get down to it, it really does. And so, unlike her, I rejected God because I thought he had abandoned me. He hadn't, and I know that now, but that's what I thought in my young 17-year-old mind. And so I didn't trust in what was going on. I didn't trust that God could make anything good out of any of this mess. I didn't trust that he would love me anymore. It was awful. It was such a dark time in my soul. But what she says is, I'm still going to trust in you. She says, deign to hear the painful whimpers of your child. I trust in you, O God, because heaven and earth will pass, but your word will last forever. I didn't have that, and I was young, and you can say that, but I think a lot of people don't have that. We, especially in in America, we've created Christianity to be this kind of fluffy, nice, happy, simplistic faith where, God just wants you to have wealth and health and everything wonderful, and you can just name it and claim it. But then when stuff like this happens, where you have the darkness of the soul or something really tragic happens in your life, what do you do? Because it doesn't feel like God is there. And so many people leave the faith when they don't feel God there, because we have this thought process that, once we believe in God and we, invite Jesus into our lives, that everything will be great, perfect, and happy. Like I thought at 17, I thought Christianity was like a shield that kept me from any bad thing happening. I didn't understand at the time that Christianity is a shield in a different kind of way. And it's a shield in that if we fully trust that God can make goodness out of bad, He will. And we will see the fruits of that. And one day we will understand what all this is about. All the bad things that happen to us. And, for her, the trials that she goes through and that she wrote them down, we can see that this is something that people who have a strong faith go through. And it helps us to relate to that, knowing that we're not alone when we feel those dark times in our souls. So she's going through something different than me, but I relate to the feeling rejected by God. And just like last time, I reminded you all, He is there. And what I didn't realize as that young teenage girl out on the football field that night, that in the Garden of Gethsemane, the sins of those 3 guys, Christ was in anguish over. And the sin that I committed by the horrible thing that I said to Him, He was in anguish over. And He was there with me on that football field that night. The pain of what I was going through blinded me to that. But He was there, and I realize that now. And I started to realize that later in my life, when I looked back on that night, He was there. And that gave me great comfort. So, if you feel this way, if you feel like you've been rejected by God, like He's just allowing all the bad things to happen to you, and, what have I done to deserve this? I've trusted in you. I believe in you. I go to Mass. I do all these good things. If it just feels like God has rejected you, know that you're not alone in that feeling, but He is there. And that's our good news. And we can trust. That's where the trust comes in. Sometimes that's crazy hard to do, but we will be sanctified through that. So have faith in that. So, heavy stuff. I told you this book is heavy. And we're only going to go through some more, but there is hope in this. We're going deep into these dark places with Sister Faustina, but we're going to get drawn out of those dark places. We'll see through Christ's mercy that He's going to talk to her about. So don't think it's all doom and gloom. We just got to go into the dark so that we can understand the light a little bit. So until next time, Catholic pilgrims, live the faith boldly and travel well.